Hi everyone. In our last lesson, we finished our execute functions. And in this lesson, we are going to start writing our query functions. Right. I'm going to say function, getOwner, and it's going to simply be a getter function. External is going to view since we are not altering anything in our contract state. And then we are going to say returns, address, and we are going to return the owner. Now we are going to implement the isUser function. I was waiting for this function as you were so that we can get rid of half of this redness in our contract. Function isUser, and we are going to get the wallet address of the user as the parameter. It's going to be a private function, and we are going to say it's going to be a view, and we are going to return a boolean. Here I'm going to return from the users wallet address so that we can get the wallet address of the user and we can check if it's address 0. If we don't have the wallet address of the user in our mapping, automatically this statement will give us the address 0. No one can have the address 0, it's a special address, so if it's the address 0, that we would know that we don't have this user. Next, we are going to create our getUser function. Function getUser. Again, we are going to get the wallet address. It's going to be an external view function, and we are going to return the user from the memory. First, I'm going to require isUser, which finally doesn't give any error, and I'm going to say user does not exist otherwise. Next, I'm going to return the user from our users mapping. Next, we have the getCar function. I'm going to say getCar, and we are going to get the ID of the car here as the parameter. Is going to be an external view function, and we are going to return car from memory like we returned the user from memory on top. Here I'm going to say require cars ID not equal to 0. Here we are checking if the car exists or not. If not, we are going to say car does not exist. After we make the check, I'm just going to return the car with the given ID. Next, we have the function getCarsByStatus. getCarsByStatus, and we are going to get the status of the car as a parameter. Again, it's going to be an external view function. It's going to return this time car array, not a single car, and it's again going to be from the memory. First, I'm going to say uIntCount equals 0. So we are initializing the count with 0, and we are going to use this count as the index for our for loops. Next, I'm going to say length equals counter.current. We are getting the current counter value as the length because if our counter is 10, this means that we added 10 cars, so our length is 10. Next, I'm going to say for I from 1 to the length that we just defined, and then I'm going to increment I. Here we are going to check if the car status is equal to the status we get, and we are going to increment the count variable we created here. With this method, we are going to get the length of the array that we are going to define later in this function. Here we are going to check if the status of this current car is equal to the status that is given us as the parameter. If they are equal to each other, we are going to increment the counter, and then our final value in the counter will be the number of cars in our mapping with the given status parameter. If this is true, I'm going to say count plus plus. Next, I'm going to define my array here that we are going to return. And we are going to define this array with the count that we created with this for loop. After this, I'm going to say count equals 0 so that we can use the same variable again. And I'm going to create another for loop here. Here we are going to check if cars i.status equal to our status in the parameter. So here where it's going to be different, we are going to say cars with status count is equal to cars I, and then I'm going to increment the count. So what we are doing here, we are checking if the car status is equal to the status we got with the parameter, and if that's the case, we are going to add this car to our cars with status array that we are going to return. And then we are incrementing count so that every time we are going to add this car as the new index in our array. After this, I'm going to basically return cars with status. So let's review this function. It's a little bit long one. First, we have a count here and we have the length here. This length is the number of cars we have in our cars mapping. Then we get the number of the cars in our mapping that the status is equal to the status we got on our parameter. Then we created our memory car array with this count. After that, we set count equals 0 so that we can use it again. We created a similar for loop like we created here, but differently. We said we are going to add the car to our cars with status array if the status of the car is equal to our parameter, and we incremented the count. After this, we have our cars with status array that consists of the cars with the status that we want, and we are returning this variable here. Now we have our calculateDebt function. It's going to take two parameters. One is use seconds and one is rent fee. It's going to be a private function. It's going to be pure because we are not even getting any data from our contract. We are just making a basic calculation based on the parameters we got. Next, I'm going to say returns, and we are going to return a unit. First, I'm going to say unit use minutes equal to use seconds divided by 60. So if you remember, we were using seconds and we were saying that we are going to convert these seconds to minutes once we try to calculate the debt. Here we are dividing this use seconds with 60 so that we can get the use minutes, and we are going to calculate the debt with this minutes. And finally, I'm going to return used minutes times rent fee. Next, we have our getCurrentCount, which is a simple getter. It's going to be an external view function, and it's going to return a unit. Next, we have our getContractBalance, and then we have the getTotalPayment. The difference was with the getContractBalance, we are returning the total balance of the contract, including the balance of the users. With this function getTotalPayment, we are just returning the total payments that are made to the contract for the user's debt, instead of adding the user's balance too, so that the owner can get the tokens based on this total payments value without ever touching or calculating users' balances. I'm going to say function getContractBalance. It's going to be an external view function, and it can only be called by the owner this time. And we are going to say returns uint, which is our contract balance. Here I'm going to say return as an address this dot balance. So we are mapping this contract address and we are getting the balance of the contract. And our final method is getTotalPayment. It's also going to be an external view function. It can only be called by the owner. Here we are also going to return the uint. And we are simply going to return the total payments. So that's our contract, and for the first time you can see that we have no errors. Let's quickly review what we did with this contract. We had three different sections. With our data section, we had the necessary data to store in our contract. We had our variables as the counter, owner, total payments. Then we created our structs, the user struct and the car struct, and we created this enum so that we can use with the car status. After this, we have our events so that we can notify frontend what's happening in the contract, and we created our mappings. So in our construct, we set the owner to the message.sender so that the initializer of this contract can be the owner. Then we initialize our total payments with 0. After that, we have our only owner modifier and we have our functions. We said first we are going to write our execute functions, then we are going to write our query functions. Execute functions were the functions which alter the state of the contract. On the other hand, the query functions were the functions that are just getting data from the contract, or pure functions that we use. Here we have functions to add the user, add a car. We can edit car metadata and edit car status. We said that we are using this as two separate functions since we may use this much more than the other. Next, we have functions to check out and check in, and we have our payment logic here. We are first depositing tokens to our balance, then the user is going to make the payment with their balance. Here they are making the payment, and they can also withdraw the balance here. We said non-reentrant here so that our function can be secure against the reentrance attacks. Next, we have another function for the owner so that the owner can get their tokens that are made as the payment to our contract. In the last section, we had our query functions. In general, we had a lot of getter functions like the getOwner, getUser, getCar. We also have the isUser function which we use privately in our contract. Next, we had a function to getCarsByStatus which filters out the car based on their status and return this as a memory array. Next, we had the calculateDebt function which was also private, and this is our only pure function. Next, we had our three getter functions. First one returns the count, and then we had two functions. One returns the balance of the contract as a whole, and the other one returns the payments that are made to the contract. In our next video, we will compile this contract and start working on our tests. Thank you very much and see you on the next one.